Imagine a young soldier, far from home, marching through mud and blood, only to face not just the enemy bullets but the cruel hand of his own commanders for a moment of weakness or defiance. During the American Civil War, discipline was enforced with methods that today seem barbaric, designed to break the spirit and enforce obedience in armies filled with volunteers unaccustomed to military life. Both Union and Confederate forces relied on the Articles of War, a set of rules carried over from earlier conflicts, to maintain order. Minor offenses like drunkenness, insubordination, sleeping on guard duty, or straggling during marches could lead to humiliating and painful punishments. Commanders had wide latitude to improvise, often choosing methods that publicly shamed the offender in front of his comrades. One of the most common was bucking and gagging. The soldier was forced to sit on the ground with his knees drawn up to his chest. His arms were pulled forward over his knees, and a sturdy stick was placed behind his knees and under his elbows, locking him in a cramped, painful position to prevent complaints or cries. A gag, often a bayonet wrapped in cloth or a wooden stick, was tied into his mouth. He might remain like this for hours or even days, exposed to the elements and the ridicule of his regiment. This punishment was used extensively on both sides. Union veteran John D. Billings described it in his memoir as a standard way to deal with minor infractions. Another agonizing penalty was riding the wooden mule, a narrow wooden rail, sharpened like a sawhorse and elevated several feet off the ground so the victim's feet could not touch, served as the mule. The soldier was made to straddle it, often with heavy weights tied to his legs to increase the pressure on his groin and thighs. Minor offenses like fighting or drunkenness could earn a man hours on this device, leading to excruciating pain, sometimes causing permanent injury or fainting. Confederate and Union artillery units sometimes tied offenders to the spare wheel of a caisson, bouncing them over rough terrain. Tying up by the thumbs was yet another torment. The soldier's thumbs were bound together and hoisted to a tree branch or pole, forcing him to stand on tiptoe. If he relaxed, his full weight pulled on the thumbs, risking dislocation or tearing. Some commanders ordered men hung by their thumbs for extended periods, a punishment borrowed from earlier military traditions. For more serious crimes against civilians or comrades, such as theft or assault, branding was occasionally used early in the war. A red-hot iron marked the offender with letters like T for thief or D for deserter, usually on the face or hip, leaving a permanent scar. Though flogging with a whip had been outlawed in the U.S. Army in 1861 and in the Confederate forces in 1862, some commanders ignored this or used unofficial beatings. Drumhead courts-martial quick. Informal trials convened in the field could impose these punishments instantly for bad behavior. Soldiers might be forced to wear barrels as shirts, with signs proclaiming their offense, or carry heavy logs for miles. One extreme case involved a soldier bound and gagged while his comrades were ordered to spit in his face as they marched past. These punishments were not just physical, they aimed at humiliation. In an era when honor was paramount, being publicly degraded could destroy a man's reputation forever. Yet, inconsistency reigned. Some commanders were lenient, others sadistic, depending on their mood or the regiment's needs. Desertion, the most common serious offense, escalated punishments dramatically. Hundreds of thousands deserted on both sides, driven by homesickness, hardship, or principle. Officially a capital crime, it was rarely punished by death early in the war due to public opinion and manpower needs. Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis often pardoned deserters, but as the war dragged on, executions increased to deter others. Executions were public spectacles meant to terrify. The condemned man sat on his coffin before an open grave, facing a firing squad from his own unit. Round 147 Union and several hundred Confederate soldiers were shot for desertion or other crimes like murder or rape. Hangings were used for crimes against civilians. In one infamous case, 20 Union-loyal North Carolinians captured by Confederates were hanged as deserters. Bounty jumpers, men who enlisted for the cash bonus, then deserted and re-enlisted elsewhere, faced the harshest treatment, sometimes tortured with thumbscrews or sent to notorious prisons. These internal punishments revealed the war's toll. Armies struggling to control men pushed to their limits. Hellish conditions in prisoner of war camps. Picture thousands of captured men, stripped of weapons and freedom, herded into overcrowded stockades where disease and despair claimed more lives than battlefields. The collapse of prisoner exchanges in 1863 turned makeshift camps into death traps on both sides. Early in the war, a cartel system allowed exchanges, keeping prisons mostly empty. But disputes over black Union soldiers, Confederates refused to exchange them or treated them as slaves, halted the process. Ulysses S. Grant later opposed resumption, seeing held Confederates as a strategic drain on the South. Over 400,000 men became prisoners, with about 56,000 dying in captivity, nearly 10% of all war deaths.